If you've ever poured your soul into something, only to watch someone else's name get stamped on the cover, then you know what I'm about to talk about. My name is Alma, and for 5 years, I was the ghost in the machine of my own father's architecture firm. This isn't just a story about getting even, it's a story about building something for yourself, when the people who were supposed to build you up try to tear you down. And if that sounds familiar, stick around. It helps to know you're not the only one who has ever had to draw their own blueprint for a new life. And if you feel that little spark of recognition, do me a favor and hit that like button. It lets me know I'm not just talking to myself out here. The air in the ballroom was thick with the scent of money and expensive perfume, a suffocating mixture of ambition and backpatting. For me, it smelled like the end of a 5-year-long marathon. 100 rows of gilt chairs faced a stage where a massive banner hung, displaying the name of our firm, Vance Architecture, and beneath it, the elegant, swirling logo I had personally designed for the Oasis. My project, my baby, my salvation for a company that had been slowly bleeding out for a decade. I stood in the back, near the service entrance, my hands clasped so tightly, my knuckles were white. This was my day. I had told myself that for months, through every sleepless night, every 7-day work week, every skipped wedding and forgotten birthday, this was the payoff. The Oasis wasn't just a building, it was a self-sustaining ecosystem. A vertical city within a city, powered by solar arrays woven into the glass. At its heart, a revolutionary water reclamation system that could recycle 98% of its own gray water. A system I had invented. A system I had perfected. A system that was about to make Vance Architecture the most important firm on the planet. My father, Arthur Vance, stepped up to the podium. He was a man who looked like he'd been carved from oak, broad-shouldered and confident, with a booming voice that had charmed city councils and billionaire investors for 40 years. He was my hero, once. He smiled, a practiced, easy grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. He thanked the mayor, the investors, the press. Standard procedure. My heart was a drum against my ribs. I could feel the weight of my team's exhaustion and hope, a palpable thing in the room. We had done it. He spoke about vision, about legacy, about the future of urban living. He painted a picture of the Oasis with words, my words, lifted directly from the pitch decks I had spent thousands of hours creating. I felt a small, proprietary thrill. Then he said the words that shattered my world. He said, "And I am proud to announce the project lead, who will be steering this monumental undertaking. A young man, with the vision and the drive to take this firm into the next generation. My son, Gareth Vance." The name hit me like a physical blow. Gareth, my brother, my charming, useless, marketing degree-holding brother, who thought a blueprint was something you used to dye t-shirts. He stepped onto the stage, preening in a suit that probably cost more than my car. He waved to the crowd, a perfect picture of unearned success. The applause was thunderous. I felt the air leave my lungs. I looked around, searching for some sign of confusion, some shared sense of outrage. I saw nothing but faces turned toward the stage, enraptured. They didn't know. Of course they didn't know. I was the secret, the weapon you keep in the dark until you need it to win the war. My father never even glanced in my direction. In his narrative, I didn't exist. I was a footnote, a cog in the machine that Gareth was now pretending to drive. The rest of the press conference was a blur, a haze of polite clapping and flashbulbs popping. I felt a quiet heat flush up my neck, a dangerous calm settling over the hurricane in my chest. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't an oversight. This was an execution. Later, as the crowd mingled, my father found me. He clasped my shoulder, his grip firm, proprietary. He said, "Alma, fantastic work, truly. You set the stage perfectly for Gareth. I've approved a token bonus for you, 25,000. Get yourself something nice." He then informed me that I'd be reassigned to a junior team working on retrofitting suburban shopping malls. He said it was a chance for me to mentor the new blood. I was being sent to the salt mines, a demotion so insulting it was almost comical. I looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time in years. I didn't see a father. I saw a CEO making a calculated business decision. He was sacrificing his most valuable asset for his legacy, for his son, for the name. I didn't say a word. I just nodded. A slow, deliberate movement. I let him think he'd won. I let him think I was broken. I walked away from him, through the crowd of people congratulating a fraud, and out of the ballroom. I didn't go back to the office. I didn't clear out my desk. I just walked. What my father and my brother didn't realize, in their glorious, blinding celebration, was that the heart of the oasis, the one piece of technology that made it all possible, wasn't owned by Vance Architecture. It was owned by me, and I had just walked out the door with it. The silence of my apartment was a stark contrast to the noise of the press conference. My place was minimalist, all clean lines and concrete floors, with a single massive floor-to-ceiling window that looked out over the city. It was a view I'd bought with the overtime pay from the very firm that had just erased me. The skyline was a jagged black silhouette against a bruised purple twilight. I could see the spot, miles away, where the foundational cranes for the oasis stood, skeletal and waiting. My monument, my tomb. I didn't cry. The shock had frozen the tears somewhere deep in my chest, a block of ice that made it hard to breathe. I slid down the wall, my back against the cool plaster, and just sat there on the floor, watching the city lights flicker on, one by one, like a million tiny, indifferent stars. The token bonus check was still in my pocket. I pulled it out. $25,000. It felt like 30 pieces of silver, a pat on the head, a tip for the maid service, after I'd built the entire palace, and for 5 years of 100-hour weeks. For designing not just a building, but a new way of life. For saving the family business. I folded the check into a tiny, sharp square, my fingernails digging crescents into the paper, and then I let it fall to the floor. My mind started to rewind, an old film reel clicking through the frames of the last 5 years. It wasn't a highlight reel, it was a catalog of 1,000 tiny cuts, a slow, methodical bleeding of my worth. I remembered the first time I brought the concept of the oasis to my father. I was 30, fresh off a major success with a sustainable housing project in Seattle. I came back to my hometown, to my father's firm, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I wanted to help. The firm was floundering, stuck in the past, designing boring glass boxes, while the world was moving towards green architecture. I saw a path forward. He'd listened in his big leather chair, steepled his fingers, and nodded. He said, "It's ambitious, Alma, a little idealistic." But he let me run with it. He gave me a small team, a shoebox office in the basement, and a budget that was a rounding error for the marketing department. He called it my Skunkworks project, a safe little sandbox where his daughter could play without breaking anything important. The work became my entire world. The 100-hour weeks weren't an exaggeration. I lived on stale coffee and the hum of my computer's fan. My friendships withered, relationships ended. I remember canceling a trip to Italy with my best friend, a trip we'd planned for years, because we were 48 hours from a crucial simulation deadline. I sent her a text from my desk at 3 a.m. She sent back a single word. Again, we didn't speak for 6 months. I missed my cousin's wedding. I forgot my own birthday. All of it was a sacrifice, laid at the altar of the oasis. I told myself it was worth it. I told myself it was for the family, for the legacy. It's a lie you can sustain for a surprisingly long time when you're running on fumes and a desperate need for approval. Gareth, meanwhile, floated through the office like a visiting royal. He'd pop his head into my basement office, which we'd nicknamed the bunker, and say things like, "Still playing with your little eco toys, sis." He'd just gotten his MBA, and my father had made him head of business development. His job, as far as I could tell, was taking clients to lunch and expensing golf trips. He never once asked about the science behind the designs. He couldn't have explained the principles of passive solar heating if his life depended on it. He just saw the renderings, the pretty pictures, and knew they would sell. The real breakthrough, the thing that made the oasis more than just a concept, was the water reclamation system. And that part of the story didn't belong to Vance Architecture at all. It belonged to me and Dr. Lena Petrova. I'd met Lena while I was getting my master's in sustainable design. She was a brilliant hydrological engineer, a genius in fluid dynamics, who had been pushed out of academia after a nasty dispute with the university over intellectual property. They'd stolen her research, published it under a senior professor's name, and then blacklisted her when she fought back. She was bitter, brilliant, and working as a freelance consultant out of a cluttered workshop that smelled of ozone and solder. She became my mentor, my partner, my secret weapon. We spent hundreds of hours in that workshop, sketching on whiteboards, building prototypes out of PVC pipe and salvaged pumps. We were trying to solve the problem of urban water waste. The system we designed used a series of osmotic filters, algae bioreactors, and UV sterilization. It was compact, efficient, and years ahead of anything else on the market. It was our creation. I remember the day we finally got it right. A tiny, self-contained prototype was humming away on a workbench, turning a beaker of sludgy gray water into crystal clear, potable liquid. Lena tested the output, her face illuminated by the green glow of a monitor. She looked at me, her eyes tired, but blazing with triumph. She said, "There it is, Alma. You've cheated gravity and filth in one elegant loop. Now, you're going to do something I never did. You're going to protect it." She was the one who pushed me to file the patent. She'd been burned, and she wouldn't let the same thing happen to me. She said, "Do not file it through the firm. Do not let your father's lawyers touch it. They work for him, not for you." She helped me set up a small, single-member LLC, just a name on a piece of paper. Athena Innovative Solutions. We used a third-party law firm she trusted. The patent for the closed-loop bioregenerative filtration system was granted, and it belonged, solely and irrevocably, to my LLC. My father never asked about the specifics. He just saw that I had solved the project's biggest technical hurdle and was happy to have the win. He assumed, I suppose, that anything I created while under his roof belonged to him. It was a logic born of arrogance, a belief that he owned not just my time, but my very thoughts. A debatable point, I'm sure, for some people. But in the world of corporate IP, an assumption like that can be a fatal flaw. Sitting there on my apartment floor, the memory of Lena's fierce, protective gaze was a jolt of electricity. She had seen this coming. Not the specifics, not my own father and brother, but the pattern. The way the world takes from women who create, the way it erases their names. My phone buzzed on the floor beside me. A text message. It was from Maya, a young, ferociously bright architectural intern I had mentored. She was the one who stayed late with me, the one who saw the real work being done, the one who I knew had been just as gutted by the announcement as I was. The message was simple. It said, "Are you okay? They're all drinking champagne. It's disgusting." Something about that message, the simple, honest solidarity in it, broke the spell. The ice in my chest cracked. Despair began to curdle, to harden into something else, something cold and sharp. Resolve, they were drinking champagne, celebrating my erasure. They thought I was at home, weeping into a pillow, defeated. They thought it was over. But I had the patent. I had the key. They had built a beautiful gleaming car, put my brother in the driver's seat, and were posing for pictures. But I was the only one with the engine, and I had just walked off the lot. It wasn't about revenge. I told myself that, over and over. It was about correction. It was about restoring a fundamental balance to the universe. My father had built his firm on a foundation of brilliant minds. He had just forgotten that the cornerstone had my name on it. I picked up my phone and typed a reply to Maya. "I'm okay, but I need a favor. Can you talk?" The plan didn't form in a single flash of inspiration. It crystallized slowly, piece by piece, out of the wreckage of my old life. It was a work of architecture. In a way, I was building my own exit, my own fortress, and I was going to use the best materials I had: foresight, alliances, and leverage. My first call wasn't to a lawyer or a rival firm, it was to Maya. We met at a nondescript coffee shop, halfway between her apartment and mine. The kind of place with mismatched furniture and weak Wi-Fi that no one from the gleaming towers of Vance architecture would ever set foot in. She looked nervous, clutching her latte like a lifeline. She kept glancing towards the door. She said, "Alma, I still can't believe it, in what they did." I just nodded. I said, "I know. But I need you to be my eyes and ears. I need to know what's happening inside. I'm not asking you to steal anything, Maya. I'm just asking you to observe, to listen. I need to know how they plan to move forward with a project they don't understand." Her fear gave way to a flicker of defiance. She'd seen my work, my dedication. She'd seen Gareth schmooze his way through meetings, while I was pulling all-nighters in the bunker. Her loyalty wasn't to the name on the building. It was to the work itself. She agreed. It was a risk for her, a huge one. An intern caught passing information would be fired and blacklisted in a heartbeat. But she did it anyway. That was the first pillar of my new structure: loyalty. The second pillar was the one Lena had helped me build years ago: foresight. My little LLC, Athena Innovative Solutions, wasn't just a holding company for a patent. After Lena's warning, I had treated it as a lifeboat. For the past 2 years, every time I developed a new technique, a new piece of software, or a unique design process that was truly my own and not just an iteration of existing firm property, I documented it. I used my personal laptop, my own time. I created a shadow portfolio of my own intellectual property. It was a quiet act of rebellion. I hadn't even fully understood I was committing. I was building a parachute, piece by piece, while still flying the plane. It was a debatable choice, ethically. Was I moonlighting? Was I hoarding IP that belonged to the firm that paid my salary? HR would certainly say so. But my logic was emotional, not legal. They were paying for my time, not my soul. They were paying for my labor, not my genius. Lena had taught me that the distinction was critical. I spent the next week in a self-imposed war room. My apartment became a command center. I bought a new laptop, a burner phone. I spread out every document I had: the patent certificates, the LLC formation papers, market analysis reports I'd run on my own time. I was mapping the battlefield. Maya would send me cryptic texts. Gareth held a kickoff meeting, tried to explain the water system. Total disaster. He called it the splashy machine. The senior engineers are furious. Another one: Dad is trying to fast-track the next phase. He's telling investors the core tech is proprietary to the firm. He's lying. Every message was a confirmation. They were arrogant. They were sloppy. They assumed I was a non-entity, a disgruntled employee who would eventually get over it. They never once considered I could be a threat. They couldn't see the board because in their minds, I wasn't even a player. The third and most important pillar was leverage. The patent was the sledgehammer. But you can't build a new house with just a sledgehammer. My true leverage wasn't just the technology. It was the trust I had built, not with my father, but with his clients and investors. Over the years, while my father and Gareth were playing golf and closing deals on the 18th hole, I was the one on the late-night calls with the engineering teams from the investment groups. I was the one walking the zoning commissioners through the environmental impact studies. I was the one who personally guaranteed that the oasis wouldn't just be beautiful, but that it would work. They didn't know my name from the press conference, but the people whose money was on the line, the people who did the real due diligence, knew me. They knew Alma Vance was the one who had the answers. My target was Sterling Dynamics. They were our biggest rival, a leaner, more innovative firm run by a woman named Evelyn Reed. Evelyn was everything my father wasn't. She was an engineer by training, not a salesman. She was sharp, respected, and had tried to poach me twice in the last 3 years. Both times, I had politely declined out of a misplaced sense of family loyalty. Now, that loyalty was a burnt-out husk. Getting a meeting wasn't hard. I didn't go through official channels. I found an old email from her. From the last time she'd reached out, it was a direct address, not a form letter from HR. I replied to that old thread. The subject line was simple. The Oasis. My message was even simpler. I believe you and I have a mutual interest in the future of sustainable architecture. I have some ideas I think you'll find compelling. I am now a free agent. I hit send, my heart hammering. It was a massive gamble. I was showing my hand to my biggest enemy's biggest rival. She replied in under an hour. My office. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. I walked into the Sterling Dynamics headquarters, feeling like a spy in enemy territory. Their office was different from ours. It was an open-concept loft, buzzing with a quiet, focused energy. No corner offices, no mahogany desks. It was a workshop, not a boardroom. Evelyn Reed met me herself. She was tall, dressed in a simple but elegant black dress, her graying hair cut in a sharp, modern style. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. She gestured to a chair in a glass-walled conference room. She said, I was at the press conference, Alma. I was surprised. And then, when I thought about it for a minute, I wasn't. Your father always valued the frame more than the picture. The blunt honesty was refreshing. It was the first time someone had validated the reality of my situation. I didn't give her a sob story. I didn't complain about my brother or my father. I treated it like a business pitch. I laid out the facts. I explained that Vance Architecture was building a multi-billion-dollar project around a piece of technology they didn't own, couldn't replicate, and didn't understand. I slid a file across the table. It contained a copy of the patent certificate for the water reclamation system, under the name of my LLC. She read it, her expression unreadable. She looked up at me. So the heart of the Oasis is yours, legally. I nodded. It is. And my father's half-built tower is now just a very expensive, very thirsty pile of concrete and steel. What do you want, Alma? I took a deep breath. This was the moment. I want a partner. I want to build something better than the Oasis. The city has a green initiative, a mandate to retrofit municipal buildings and develop new, zero-carbon public infrastructure. The budget is massive. The political will is there. They need a technology partner who can deliver. I can deliver, but I need the scale and the credibility that a firm like Sterling can provide. I'm not just offering you a patent, Evelyn. I'm offering you the city. I slid a second file across the table. It was a detailed proposal, a full business plan for a new joint venture, a partnership between Sterling Dynamics and my tiny LLC, Athena Innovative Solutions. The plan outlined how we could take my core technology and apply it to a portfolio of citywide projects, leaving the Oasis in the dust. The name for this new initiative was on the cover page, Aqua Vita. She spent the next hour reading, her focus absolute. She peppered me with questions, technical questions, financial questions, logistical questions, questions Gareth wouldn't have even known how to ask. It wasn't an interrogation. It was a collaboration. For the first time in years, I was talking to someone who spoke my language. Finally, she closed the folder and looked at me, a slow smile spreading across her face. She said, Your father isn't just greedy, Alma. He's a fool. He threw away a diamond because he preferred the shine on a piece of glass. Let's draft the partnership agreement. Welcome to the team. As I walked out of that building, the city skyline looked different. It wasn't a backdrop to my failure anymore. It was a canvas, and I was finally holding the brush. It was never about revenge. It was about reclaiming the right to sign my own name to my own work. My father had named his project the Oasis, a place of refuge in a barren desert. He just didn't realize he was the one who was about to be left in the sand. The first move in a quiet war isn't a cannon shot. It's a whisper, a change in the wind that only a few people notice until the storm is already on top of them. My first move was a press release. It was drafted by Sterling Dynamics' top-tier PR team, vetted by a small army of lawyers, and coordinated to drop at exactly 9:01 a.m. on a Monday morning, just as the markets opened. It didn't mention Vance architecture. It didn't mention the Oasis. It was an announcement of a bold, new public-private partnership. Sterling Dynamics, in collaboration with the visionary technology firm Athena Innovative Solutions, had been chosen by the mayor's office to lead the city's new multi-billion-dollar green initiative, Aquavita. The release highlighted the revolutionary water reclamation technology at the heart of the initiative, a system protected by a patent held by Athena's founder and CEO, Alma Vance. My name, my company, my technology, front and center. I was at home when it went live. I had a news feed up on my monitor, a direct line to Maya on my burner phone, and a cup of coffee in my hand. For a few minutes, there was nothing. Silence. Then the first tremor. A trade publication, Architect's Ledger, ran the story. Then a local business journal. Then the city's main newspaper. By 9:30 a.m., it was the lead story on every local news outlet's website. My phone buzzed. It was Maya. Her text was frantic. "Holy crap, all hell is breaking loose." He typed back, "Tell me everything." The next hour was a blow-by-blow account from inside the collapsing kingdom. Maya described a scene of pure, unadulterated panic. My father had apparently seen the news on his way into the office. He had stormed onto the main floor, his face the color of beetroot, waving his phone in the air, demanding to know who Athena Innovative Solutions was. No one knew. Of course, no one knew. It was a ghost company I had created from the shadows of his own neglect. Gareth, according to Maya, was even worse. He was trying to project calm, telling everyone it was a misunderstanding, a minor competitor making a desperate play. But his hands were shaking. He'd been fielding calls from the primary investors of the Oasis, the ones I had personally walked through the schematics. Their questions were suddenly very pointed. Is it true that the water system isn't your IP? Can you provide documentation of ownership? Is our multi-hundred-million-dollar investment secured? The answer to all of those questions was no. The real chaos began when the engineering department was brought in. My father and Gareth herded the senior project engineers into the main boardroom. Maya, being an intern, was tasked with getting coffee, which gave her a perfect excuse to linger by the door. She said my father demanded that they find a workaround. Just design a new system. He'd boomed, as if it were as simple as choosing a new paint color. One of the senior engineers, a man named David Chen, who I deeply respected, had the courage to speak up. He told my father, "Arthur, that's not possible. What Alma designed, it's 5, maybe 10 years ahead of anything else. We can't just design a new one. It would take years of R&D, and there's no guarantee we could even get close without infringing on her patent. Her design is elegant, but it's an intellectual minefield. We can't touch it." The silence that followed, Maya said, was deafening. The truth had finally landed in the center of the boardroom table, and it was a bomb. They couldn't build the Oasis, not as it was designed, not as it was sold to investors. The entire project was a hollow shell, a beautiful facade with a gaping hole where its heart was supposed to be. My phone started ringing. The real one, not the burner. The caller ID said Arthur Vance. I looked at the screen, at my father's name. A younger version of me would have answered, her heart leaping with a mix of fear and a desperate hope for reconciliation. But that version of me was gone. I let it ring and ring and ring until it went to voicemail. He called again. I silenced it. Then Gareth called. I silenced that one too. Then a text from my father. "Call me, now. It's a family emergency." The sheer audacity of it, to frame his professional implosion as a family matter, was almost breathtaking. I didn't reply. My silence was my new weapon. They were used to my voice, filling in the gaps, solving the problems, making everything right. Now all they got was dead air, and in that silence, they were forced to confront the consequences of their own choices. By noon, the story had taken on a life of its own. The narrative being formed by the media was devastating for my father. It wasn't just that a rival had won a major city contract. It was the subtext. A brilliant designer, the daughter of the firm's founder, had left and immediately partnered with their biggest competitor, taking the firm's supposed crown jewel technology with her. It painted a picture of incompetence, of mismanagement, of a firm so broken it couldn't even retain its own family, its own top talent. The masterstroke, however, came from Evelyn Reed. She was a genius at corporate warfare. She gave an interview to a major financial news network that afternoon. She was calm, poised, and utterly lethal. The reporter asked her if she was concerned about the stalled Oasis project. Evelyn smiled a razor-thin smile and said, "Sterling Dynamics is focused on the future, on delivering the Aquavita initiative for the citizens of this city. We don't comment on the internal struggles of other firms. But I will say this, talent is the most valuable asset in our industry, and true talent will always find a home where it is valued, recognized, and given the freedom to innovate." She never said my name. She didn't have to. The message was clear. Vance Architecture didn't value talent. Sterling Dynamics did. She had turned my personal betrayal into a public referendum on my father's leadership. That night, I looked out my window at the city. The skeletal cranes of the Oasis were dark. The work had stopped. It was no longer a monument to my erasure. It was now a monument to his greed, a half-built testament to the fact that he had tried to build a future on a foundation of lies, and it had crumbled before it ever reached the second floor. I felt a quiet, cold satisfaction. I told myself, again, that it wasn't about revenge. It was about creating a reality where competence was the only currency that mattered. And in that new reality, my father and brother were bankrupt. The days following the announcement were like watching a slow-motion demolition. The power structure at Vance Architecture didn't collapse with a bang. It crumbled from the inside out, brick by brick, as the people who held it together began to walk away. The first to go were the clients. Not all of them, but the important ones. The ones who weren't just investing money, but also their reputations. The primary anchor tenant for the Oasis, a massive international tech conglomerate, publicly announced they were reevaluating their commitment in light of the project's unforeseen technological hurdles. And that was corporate speak for "we're out." I knew it was coming. Their CEO had been one of the people I'd spent countless hours with, reassuring him of the system's viability. His trust was in me, not in the Vance name. He called me directly, the day after the Aquavita announcement. He said, "Alma, you were the reason we signed on. If you're not there, and the technology isn't there, then the deal isn't there. Let me know where you land. We're interested in what you do next." I didn't have to poach him, I just had to exist. My competence was a magnet, and it was pulling all the vital components away from my father's failing machine. Then the talent started to leave. David Chen, the senior engineer who had spoken the truth in the boardroom, sent me his resume that week. His email was short. He wrote, "I'd rather work for a person who builds things than for a man who breaks them." I forwarded it to Evelyn. He was hired within 48 hours. 2 more of my core team from the Oasis project followed him. They were the architects and engineers who had been in the trenches with me, who knew Gareth was a figurehead, and I was the real architect. Their departure was a critical blow. They were the only ones, besides me, who had even a passing familiarity with the system's integration requirements. Without them, the blueprints for the Oasis were essentially written in a dead language. My father's response was predictable. He tried to fight fire with lawyers. I received a furious, rambling cease and desist letter from his corporate attorneys. It was a masterpiece of blustering legal threats. It accused me of intellectual property theft, of violating a non-compete clause that didn't exist, of tortious interference with their business. It was a scare tactic, a legal smokescreen designed to intimidate a lone individual into submission. It might have worked on the old Alma, but I wasn't the old Alma. I had Evelyn Reed's legal team on my side now, a pack of sharks who ate letters like this for breakfast. My lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Jessica, laughed when I forwarded it to her. She said, "This is the legal equivalent of a toddler throwing a tantrum. Let me handle it." Her response was a thing of beauty. It was calm, precise, and devastating. It methodically dismantled every one of their claims, citing the patent documentation, my LLC's legal standing, and the fact that I had never signed the specific non-compete agreement they were referencing. It concluded with a politely worded sentence that was a dagger wrapped in silk. Should Vance Architecture continue to make these baseless and defamatory claims against Miss Vance or her business interests, we will be forced to explore all available legal remedies for damages to her professional reputation. They were threatening to sue me, and my lawyer countered by threatening to sue them for defamation. It was checkmate. We never heard from their lawyers again. The final, desperate counter came not from a lawyer, but from my father himself. He called me, and this time, I answered. His voice was different. The booming confidence was gone, replaced by a strained, thin tone I'd never heard before. He didn't yell. He tried to reason. "Alma," he said, his voice slick with a false sincerity, "we need to talk. There's been a misunderstanding, a breakdown in communication." I stayed silent, letting the emptiness of the line do the work for me. He continued, stumbling over his words. He's young. He's learning. I thought it was time. But I was wrong. I see that now. We need you, Alma. I'm prepared to make you a senior partner, a full partner. Name your price. We can put this all behind us." It was the offer I had dreamed of for 5 years, the validation I had craved, and now that it was here, it felt like ash in my mouth. He wasn't offering it because he valued me. He was offering it because he was drowning, and he thought I was a life raft. He still saw me as a tool, a solution to his problem. He hadn't learned a thing. This wasn't about revenge. But this moment was about clarity. I let him finish. I let the desperation hang in the air. Then I said, in a voice that was perfectly calm and level, "Thank you for the offer, Father, but I'm not interested in a partnership. I've already found one." And then I hung up. That was the end. The power hadn't just shifted. The entire board had been flipped. He had started the game, thinking he was the king, and I was a pawn. He failed to realize that in my game, the pawns that make it to the other side of the board get to become queens. The meeting took place a week later. They requested it, not at an office, not at a restaurant, but at a neutral, sterile hotel conference room. It felt like a surrender negotiation. My father and Gareth were already there when I arrived with Evelyn Reed. I insisted she come. This was a business meeting, not a family therapy session. They looked terrible. My father seemed to have aged a decade. His expensive suit hung on him, and the powerful set of his shoulders had slumped. Gareth was pale, his usual smug confidence replaced by a twitchy, nervous energy. The air was thick with defeat. My father tried to take control, to run the meeting like he always had, but the power was gone from his voice. He made a rambling, disjointed speech about family, legacy, and finding a way forward. He talked about a licensing agreement, a way for Vance Architecture to use my technology to finish the oasis. He was trying to salvage something, anything, from the wreckage. Gareth just sat there, staring at the polished table, unable to meet my eyes. He, the great project lead, had nothing to say now that the project was dead. When my father finally ran out of words, Evelyn spoke. Her voice was quiet, but carried the weight of absolute authority. She said, "Arthur, there seems to be a misunderstanding. We're not here to negotiate a license. The Aquavita initiative is already underway. The city has signed the contracts. Our investors are in place. Sterling Dynamics and Athena Innovative Solutions are moving forward. Vance Architecture's ability to complete the oasis is frankly not our concern. My father looked at me then, a desperate, pleading look. Alma, this was it. The final confrontation. There was no shouting, no tears, just a quiet, surgical strike. I leaned forward slightly. I said, "You once told me that my job was to set the stage for Gareth. And I did. You're on his stage now, he's the project lead. The future of the firm. You should probably ask him what to do next." The words hung in the air. I had taken his own condescending praise and turned it back on him like a knife. Gareth flinched, as if I'd slapped him. My father just stared, his mouth slightly open. For the first time in my life, I had left him utterly speechless. There was nothing left to say. Evelyn and I stood up. I gave my father and brother one last, long look. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel pity. I felt nothing. They were just two men in a room, architects of their own ruin. And then I turned and walked away. The news came 2 weeks later, not through a phone call, but in an official press release from the board of directors of Vance Architecture. Arthur Vance was retiring, effective immediately. The board thanked him for his decades of service. Corporate code for being pushed out. A second, smaller announcement followed. Gareth Vance was no longer with the firm. The investors had cleaned house. The name on the door might have been Vance, but the money had the final say. My vindication wasn't in that press release. It wasn't in their downfall. It was in the quiet moments that followed. It was in signing the final partnership agreement with Evelyn, my own name next to my own title. Founder and CEO, Athena Innovative Solutions. It was in walking through the new, bustling offices of the Aquavita project team, seeing David Chen and my other former colleagues laughing and sketching on whiteboards, free and inspired. It was in standing with the mayor at the groundbreaking ceremony for our first municipal retrofit, a project that would provide clean, recycled water to 100,000 people. My new office at Sterling Dynamics had a view that rivaled my apartments. I could see the whole city spread out before me, and in the distance, I could still see the cranes over the stalled Oasis project. They hadn't moved. The half-built structure sat there, a silent, rusting skeleton, a monument not to my father's greed, but to a simple, fundamental truth. You cannot build a legacy on stolen credit. You cannot build a future by erasing the people who designed it. It wasn't about revenge, it was about reality. The reality I had been forced to build for myself, one correct decision at a time. The skyline was changing, and for the first time, I felt like it was truly mine to shape. It's funny how your perspective changes. For years, I looked at the city's skyline as a goal, a destination, a place where my father's name was written in steel and glass, and where I hoped, one day, to add my own signature in the margins. Now I see it differently. It's not a destination, it's a starting point. The oasis still stands, or what's left of it. It was eventually bought for pennies on the dollar by a real estate trust that plans to turn it into luxury storage units. A monument to ambition turned into a closet for rich people's junk. There's a certain poetry in that, I think. A building that was supposed to be a self-sustaining ecosystem is now just a box to hold things people have forgotten they own. My father, I heard, moved to Florida. He plays a lot of golf. We don't speak. There's nothing left to say. My brother Gareth tried to launch a consulting firm. It failed in 6 months. Last I heard, he was selling high-end real estate, using his charm and his father's old contact list to get by. He's back to doing what he does best, selling things other people have built. And me, I'm here, in my office. The Aquavita project is a resounding success. We've retrofitted 3 major municipal buildings, with a dozen more in the pipeline. We're not just saving the city millions in water costs. We're fundamentally changing the way people think about urban infrastructure. My little LLC, Athena Innovative Solutions, is no longer so little. It's a respected name in the industry. My name, the one I chose. Sometimes, late at night, when the office is quiet, I pull out the patent certificate. It's framed now, hanging on my wall. And next to it, I framed that insulting little bonus check for $25,000. Some people might think it's petty, a reminder of the bitterness. But it's not. It's a reminder that value is subjective until you make it objective. To my father, my 5 years of work, my soul, the very heart of his company's salvation, was worth a token bonus. To the city, to our partners, to my team, that same work was worth billions. It was never about revenge. It was about finding the right marketplace for my work. And sometimes, to do that, you have to burn the old one to the ground. So here's the moral of the story. The thing I want you to take away from my experience. Your worth is not determined by the people who are incapable of seeing it. It's not defined by the title they give you, the bonus they hand you, or the name they put on your work. Your value is inherent. It's in your skill, your dedication, your integrity. It's in the things you build, both for the world and for yourself. Don't ever wait for someone to give you permission to be powerful. Don't wait for them to recognize your contributions. The world is full of people who will gladly take your genius and call it their own. Your job is not to convince them to be fair. Your job is to build your own foundation, to own your own intellectual property, to create a structure so strong and so valuable that your success becomes an undeniable fact. Let them have their crumbling monuments to ego. You go build an empire of competence. Thank you for listening to my story. It's not something I talk about often, but I think it's important to share these things. It's important to know that you are not alone in these fights. If any part of this resonated with you, if you've ever felt overlooked, underestimated, or erased, please leave a comment below. I read them all, and it helps to know that we're all in this together. And of course, if you want to hear more stories about turning injustice into vindication, don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you don't miss what's next. Build well and be well.